everyone, welcome to the current affairs series of Drishti IAS. I am Ritu and today we are with the session of miscellaneous and this is the episode 3 of miscellaneous. I am hoping that you are liking the previous sessions. So moving towards the first news of today's session. So the first news is Global Innovation Index. And who publishes Global Innovation Index? So it is published by World Intellectual Property Organization and India has ranked 40th into this thing. And what it shows? So it shows the significant progress from 81st position in 2015 and right now India's position is 40th. And this gain highlights India's sustained and substantial growth in innovation over the last 8 years. And India has only 4 science and technological clusters, and who are the Chennai, Bangalore, Mumbai, and Delhi. And but when we see the data from the China and US, so China has 24 and the US has 21. But still India has, and India's rank is very much appreciative into this arena. And then Switzerland is the most innovative economy in 2023, followed by the Sweden, United States, United Kingdom, and the Singapore. And the index of 2023 ranks the most innovative economies of 132 economies. So out of 132, India's rank is the 40th. Then we come to the next one. Next one is about WHO SPECS 2030 initiatives. So what is this WHO SPECS 2030 initiative? So we already know that a lot of people facing lots of eye issues and they need spectacles, but they cannot have spectacles because of the economic condition, because of the lack of awareness. So that's why the WHO has come up with the initiatives which is known as SPECS 2030 initiatives. And it provides access to eye care facilities is a major challenge and low and middle income countries. So it will provide eye care to the low and middle income countries. So it will cover all over the economies, but especially it will focus on the low and middle income countries. And in view of this crisis, it was agreed to launch an initiative called SPECS 2030 to provide integrated people-centric eye care in the 74th World Health Assembly held in the year 2021. So in 2021 year, it has been decided that there will be an initiative of SPECS 2030 and you already know that it has been initiated by WHO and initiatives aims to help member countries to address the issue of spectacles while ensuring quality eye care. And as you already know that a lot of people having refractive error and access to quality, affordable and people-centric services for its diagnosis. So a lot of people cannot even diagnose that they are suffering from cataract, they are suffering from myopia. So all these diagnostic process will happen unto this program. Then we'll have a data here about that what is the data of the people who needs the spectacles and who have a eye problem. So according to the World Health Organization, more than 2.2 billion people globally suffer from the vision problems and nearly 1 billion people of these cases could be prevented. It means that whatever the cases we have of the eye problem, 1 out of 2.2 billion, nearly 50% can be treated and can be prevented and their eyes can be treated well. But due to lack of access, due to lack of awareness, due to lack of economic support, they become blind and they faces lots of eye issues. And 90% of the person with visual impairments or blindness live in low and middle income countries. And it is estimated that by the year 2050, 50% of the world's population will suffer from myopia. So what is myopia? So myopia is nearsightedness. It means that near objects will be visible to you, but the far objects will not be visible to you. And it has also estimated that half of the world's population will need glasses in the near future. So this also says lots of about our health condition, eye health condition, our food pattern, our standard of living. So because of that also we need spectacles in the near future. Then come to the next one. Next one is about Global Tax Evasion Report 2024. And the European Union Tax Observatory has released the Global Tax Evasion Report 2024 and it highlights several important issues related to the global minimum tax on billionaires. So usually what happens that lot of rich people try to evade tax and this is very unethical practice which is followed not just India but all over the world. And many times we have seen that in order to evade tax they also migrate to the other countries. So this shows a very bad example that how a country and how the richest person of any country wants to evade tax, and they had also negative impact on the GDP and the economic function of any country. So they try illegal methods by not paying taxes, by underreporting their income, inflating deduction, hiding money in offshore accounts, or using other fraudulent methods to reduce the tax. And this is a deliberate and illegal attempt to reduce tax obligations and misrepresenting, concealing financial information. So they always try to conceal their financial information, and according to the report, offshore tax evasion has declined in the last decade. Because of this report, and so many governments have implemented strict measures. And in 2013, the 10% of the world's GDP was stored in global tax havens, but now only 25% of this money remains tax free. So this is a very also serious situation, and shell companies often try to use income taxes or avoid income taxes. So the effective tax rates on the wealth of billionaires globally are 0 to 0.5%. And the report has also flagged the trend of greenwashing the global minimum tax, in which multinational companies can reduce their tax rates by 15% if they have tax credit or green tax credit fund to low carbon transition. So by this means also they can greenwash their tax. And the report also supports a global minimum tax on billionaires, proposing a rate of 2% on their bills. Suppose that if any person having X amount of money and net worth is X amount, so the person has to give 2% of the total net worth as a tax, and establishing a mechanism to tax wealthy people who are long-term residents of a country and choose to invest in low tax countries. So these kind of mechanism will be also improved by this report. Then we have another session which is Rashtriya Gokul Mission. So what is this Rashtriya Gokul Mission? So under it, the basic idea of Rashtriya Gokul Mission is that the high quality of sperm will be invented and will be made in the laboratories, and research and development will happen, and that will provide high quality of cows, and that will also provide the livestock population and also livestock production and products related to livestock. But however, a recent report and recent analysis of Rashtriya Gokul Mission suggests that the number of diversity in cow breeds have been declined, and only Gir cow has been given the importance, and the focus has been given only to the Gir cow. And why it is dangerous for an ecosystem? Because in an ecosystem the diversity is needed, and for diversity you need different kind of breeds. But under this mission what we have seen that only one type of cow is promoted, which is very problematic for an ecosystem. And also many times we have seen that by using sperms and by cross fertilization, by intersector fertilization, they try to produce different kinds of the calf, but that is not beneficial, and it also often leads lots of problem. So this is the thing. And because of that, what we have seen that cross breeding cows of Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand with Gir cows may increases the milk production, but may lead to the physical changes which should be avoided. And because of that, we have seen that other cows have seen the decline in their numbers, and so it's high time that the mission should be careful and they should promote every breed of the cows. Then come to the next one. Next one is about Interconnected Disaster Risk Report 2023. And Interconnected Disaster Risk Report 2023 has put the world interdependence in the spotlight, warning the immediate global tipping points and underscoring the need of the urgent action, prevalent potentially catastrophic consequences. So with the help of United Nations, a disaster risk report is a science-based annual report issued by the United Nations, also Institute for the Environment and Human Security, first published in 2021. So what this report suggests that? So this report suggests that we have lots of tipping point which shows that catastrophic events are happening in the environment, and that is not good for the climate change, that is not good for the climate action. It means that we are not taking enough climate action in order to improve our environment, and we are becoming more vulnerable. So this report suggests that, and each year the report analyzes several real life examples of disasters and explain how they are linked to each other with the human actions. And the report also shows that stable system can gradually become dysfunction. So whatever you are seeing that today air quality in Delhi is bad, but when it comes to the Himalayan areas or the rural areas, you can find that comparatively it is better, but it is fine normal out there, but throughout the time it will become dysfunctional. So this is another alarming situation. And then what other report introduces? So the report introduces the concept of risk tipping points that reflect the inability of the social ecosystem to contain risk and increasing risk of the catastrophic impact. So the report also says that how the risk are increasing, and they had also suggested environmental tipping points, groundwater depletion, this is very big concern, accelerating the extinction of species, rapid melting of mountain glaciers, rising space debris, unbearable heat, unusable future, and interconnectedness. And what is all these says that these all things are interconnected. It means that one action is followed by another, and this whole makes our environment very much vulnerable, and also made us vulnerable because we are part of this environment. Then we have another news. Another news is about International Migration Outlook 2023, and a report titled International Migration Outlook 2023 on international migration pattern was released by Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So OECD has released this report on international migration outlook. And what report's finding is, so the highlight of the report is that India has overtook the China to become primary source of migration among OECD countries in 2021 and 2022, and India consistently topped the list with 0.41 million new immigrants in both years, with China had 0.23 million new immigrants, followed by the Romania with 2 lakhs new immigrants. And Russia-Ukraine war led to a record influx of refugees in OECD areas, with more than 10 million people becoming internally displaced and refugees. And India, Uzbekistan, Turkey saw significant increase in worker migration, making them the leading countries for migration after Ukraine. So this report says that India's migration is because of happening of out of work, out of necessity, because they all have migrated from the Ukraine to India, and now they are migrating to OECD countries, and now they have also crossed the limit of the China. Then we have also annual survey of India's city system 2023, and who publishes this particular survey? So it is published by Jangad Center for Citizenship and Democracy, a non-profit institute, highlights the challenges and constraints faced by the local governments in Indian cities. And there are significant finding of this particular survey and particular report that the eastern states, including the Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, West Bengal, have relatively better urban laws than the southern state. And this is a very, what you can say, different kind of report, because usually it has been perceived that eastern states are not that developed and they lacks on many fronts, but in this front they have a better system than southern states. And nearly 39% of the state capitals in India lack active master plans, and most local governments in Indian cities are financially dependent on the state funds, so that's why they lack the financial autonomy. And other findings are the local governments in Indian cities have limited control over the major financial matters, including taxation, borrowing, and budget approval, with most cases requiring state government approval. So what this point tells us? So this point tells us that the local government lacks autonomy, and they had to be dependent on the state government even for the borrowing, even for any kind of the implementation. So their voices and their sayings are very low there, and only Assam gives its urban government the power to collect major taxes. many times we have seen that in majority of the areas, the country states does not have, local governments does not have this kind of authority and power to collect the taxes except Assam. And except for 5 states, Bihar, Jharkhand, Odisha, Meghalaya and Rajasthan, city governments in all other must obtain approval from the state before borrowing funds. So Bihar, Jharkhand, Odisha, Meghalaya and Rajasthan does not have such limitations. There are disparities in the level of influence and the control over the finance across different urban categories. And mayors in mega cities are not directly elected, though in few cities they are directly elected. So it means that those who are directly elected, they have more autonomy, they have more say, but those who are not directly elected, they often have to depend on the state governments and the bigger governments. So here there is a dependence of the local governments on the state governments. Then we have another one, which is State Food Security Index 2022 to 2023, and it has been released by the Food Safety and Standard Authority of India, which is FSSAI in short. And what it represents, so it is an annual assessment that evaluates the performance of the state and union territories on food security, because right now food security is the biggest concern, and it tells that so many of our population does not have food security in terms of the access, in terms of the quality. So it's high time that we need to assess our food security condition and how many population which are still vulnerable for the food security. And the index is a dynamic benchmarking approach that commemorates or combines quantitative and qualitative analysis to provide an unbiased framework. And SFSI was launched in the year 2018-19 to bring competitiveness and positive change in the food safety ecosystem. And they had also added a new rank, which is a new parameter, which is improvement in SFSI rank. And what it represents, so it represents that whatever the score you have last year, so this year you will be ranked accordingly, and the improvement can be also assessed and improvement can be also judged. But what had happened that most of the states had not performed well into this thing. And what are the key findings of this particular report? So the key findings that over the past 5 years, 19 out of the 20 largest Indian states, including Maharashtra, Bihar, Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, have experienced a decline in SFSI scores. It means that here there will be the assessment that what you have scored last year and what you have scored this year. So out of 2019 states have declined, and this shows that how much food insecurity we have. And then in the parameter degradation of food testing infrastructure in the year 2022 to 2023, Gujarat and Kerala performed the best while Andhra Pradesh had performed the worst. Punjab and Himachal Pradesh got the highest marks in and Jharkhand also got the lowest marks in compliance score parameter. So Punjab and Himachal Pradesh got the highest marks in the parameter compliance score parameter, and Jharkhand got the lowest marks. And parameters measures licensing and registration of the food business, inspection conducted, special drives conducted, camps. So these are the objective of this particular parameters. And there has been significant improvement in the new parameters rank of SFSI only in Punjab. It means that only Punjab is a state where their improvement can be seen and their score can be increased, but rest of the Punjab, all states are in the declining state. Then come to the another one. Another one is about Goa Maritime Conclave 2023, and this is the 4th edition of Goa Maritime Conclave, and with the help, and it was organized by the Naval War College Goa, and it was attended by the representatives of the 12 Indian Ocean countries, including the Bangladesh, Indonesia, Madagascar, Malaysia, Maldives, Mauritius. And the theme of the 2023 is maritime security in the Indian Ocean region, which is very much important, translating common maritime priorities into a collaboration mitigation framework. So basically this maritime conclave is to exchange the knowledge between each other, to cooperate each other, and what are the challenges we have in the Indian Ocean. So that's why this particular conclave has been designed, and where the countries have exchanged their concerns, they exchange their knowledge, they exchange their technology. So basically this is for this thing. And they had also helped each other in the academics, research and development. Then we have AI Security Summit 2023, and right now AI is very much important because artificial intelligence is the need of an hour. And without the use of artificial intelligence, the sector cannot be imagined. They are used in disaster management, they are used in agriculture, they are used in medicines, they are used in engineering. So that's why it's very important to analyze the advantages and disadvantages of AI. And here we will discuss about the frontier AI. So frontier AI is defined as a highly capable foundation generator AI model that is capable of generating realistic and reliable outputs such as text, images, audio or video on demand. So that provides very much realistic text, video, audio on demand. So that's why they are known as the frontier AI, which is also known as the advanced AI. And Artificial Intelligence Security Summit 2023 was held in Bletchley Park, England. And to address these challenges, so this particular AI summit has been uh, designed, and summit has been held to know the challenges can be occurred with the frontier AI and what we are facing as a challenge. And so many countries are participants. 28 major countries including the European Union are participants of this particular thing, where they had discussed about the potential risk occurred from the frontier AI. And we had already discussed about that, what is frontier AI. Then we come to Wildlife Justice Commission report. And Wildlife Justice Commission report, a non-profit organization dedicated to combating organized crime, has released a new report, and title is Convergence of Wildlife Crime with the Other Forms of Organized Crime, a review to 2023. And what this report particularly tells about, so this report tells about that so many crimes are happening, and there is a animal trafficking, there is also human trafficking, there are lots of corruption, there is also degradation to environment, there is also degradation to the ecosystem, and it also affecting the humans. And these all things are the interconnected, and they are the organized crimes, and which are overlooked, and no one even knows about these kind of crimes are happening. Smuggling and so many things are happening. They kill animals, they do cruelty with the animals. So this particular report talks about that. And what is the highlight of this particular report? The highlight of this particular report is the illegal sand mining, and this has been regarded as the first environmental crime, and it has been first noticed by this Wildlife Justice Commission. And it also tells the connection include the protection racket, extortion, murder, money laundering, illegal drugs, tax evasion and corruption. So all these things are the interconnected, and with the help of all these chains the organized crimes took place. So this is Wildlife Justice Commission. And what is the title? So this is the title, Convergence of Wildlife Crime with the Other Forms of Organized Crime, a review to 2023. Then we come to the another slide. Another slide is about Adaptation Gap Report 2023. So what is this Adaptation Gap Report is about? So it tells the gap that what we have estimated last year and how much spended we have this year. And basically it is dedicated to the climate actions, that how much funds required for the climate actions. But it also addresses the crucial problem, the gender sensitive problem, the gender issues, the poverty issues. So it is not just limited to the climate thing, it is also covers the other parameters which are required. So what is adaptation gap? So it is likely to be, so when we talk about that, how much higher it is, so adaptation gap is likely to be 10 to 18 times larger than the current international adaptation finance flows, which is about 50% higher than the past estimates. And the adaptation finance gap refers to the gap between the estimated adaptation financing needs and cost and finance flows, which had widened over the time. I already have told you into the introduction session. And this year report focuses on adaptation of the ability of the funds to complete adaptation projects. And what it has found out that low middle income countries are facing lots of this gap, and they have a huge gap. So it's high time that developed countries must help in order to reduce that gap. And what are the findings of the report? So the current adaptation finance gap is now estimated as US $194 to 366 billion annually, and only 2% international public finance for the adaptation, which lists gender equality as primary goal, has evaluated and gender responsive, the remaining 24% being either gender specific or integrated. So I have already told you that it is not just dedicated to the climate action, they are also gender responsive, and domestic spending and private financing are the main source for the adaptation fund. And because low middle income countries does not have much domestic support and private financing, so that's why their gap is very much wide. On the other hand, the developed countries have this kind of domestic funding and private funding, so that's why their gap is much reduced. And they had also asked the organization like IMF, World Bank to help the low middle income countries to reduce their gap. So this is the finding of the report, and they had also focused on the water, food, agriculture, infrastructure, private sector development. Then we come to the production gap report 2023. And production, what is production gap? So production gap is the difference between the government's planned fossil fuel production and global production level consistent with limiting the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius to 2 degrees Celsius. And it has been published by Stockholm Environment Institute along with the climate analysis, E3G, International Institute for Sustainable Development, and United Nations Environment Program. And what report accesses? So it accesses the government's planned and projected production of coal, oil and gas against the global levels in line. As you already know that in the Paris climate, we had decided it will try to reduce by 1.5 degrees Celsius. But the report finding is very much warning and very much what you can say problematic, and the projection is 69% higher than the 2 degree Celsius targets. And overall government plans and projection will increase global coal production by 2030. And what it says that whatever the national plans each country has planned in order to reduce, the production gap is not aligned with the international plans, and because of that the gap is wide for the developing countries and also for the developed countries. And they have a different aims. India has a different kind of the aim. So India's NDC aim to reduce emission intensity by 45% by 2030 compared to 2005 levels, and it also aimed to achieve 50% non-fossil power capacity by 2030. So they are trying to shift towards the renewable energy and a clean fossil fuel energy. Then we come to another one. Another one is about PM Janman Yojana. And who had started this PM Janman Yojana? So Ministry of Tribal Affairs highlighted the ambitious Prime Minister Tribal Justice Mahabhiyan PM Janman scheme. So Ministry of Tribal Affairs. So whenever in prelims examination, if there will be the question that PM Janman Yojana is initiated by which ministry, so it is initiated by the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, and this particular Yojana is dedicated to the tribal and especially for the PVTZs. And which section it dedicates? So it dedicates the upliftment of vulnerable tribal groups. So they are also known as particularly vulnerable tribal groups, and this initiative has the potential to improve their livelihood, to improve their standard of living, to associate themselves with the mainstream world. And PM Janman is government scheme aimed at bringing tribal communities into the mainstream. And this is an integrated program along with the central sector scheme, centrally sponsored scheme. And the scheme will focus on the 11 key functionalities and 9 line ministries which will ensure implementation of existing scheme of PVTZs villages. And here we will discuss about the PVTZs. So what the scheme covers? So the scheme covers various sectors including safe housing, access to clean drinking water, better health care, education, nutrition, road, telecom connectivity, and also the facility of the PM Awas Yojana, so that they should not be sidelined and they should be also associated with the mainstream population, and they have also right to be developed into this country. And this scheme includes establishment of Van Dhan Vikas Kendras for the trading of forest produce, because generally they live in isolated places in jungles, and off-grid solar energy system for 1 lakh houses and arrangement of solar street lights. And it is also expected to enhance the quality of the life well-being of PBTZs by recognizing and valuing their unique and valuable contribution to national and global development. And so they will also highlight that how environmentally sustainable they are. They have a different culture, how much they contribute to the economy. So the scheme will also highlight their contribution, that how much essential they are for us environmentally, culturally, and also economically. Here we will discuss about the PBTZs. So in the year 1973, the Dhebar Commission established a primitive tribal groups as a distinct categories. So what we have seen that in 1947, and when the constitution also made, and when the election also happened in 1952, the issue of PBTZs are not raised high, and the issue came into 1973 when Dhebal Commission formed, and they had included the tribal communities, stable population, use of pre-agriculture technologies, economic backwardness, and low literacy. So these are the criteria under which any tribal community is categorized as a PBTZs, because they do not have much population, they are isolated, they have low literacy problem, they have economic backwardness, they have social backwardness. So because of that thing, on the basis of that parameter, PBTZ has been categorized, and these groups are identified as less developed among the tribal communities. And in the year 2006, the government of India changed the name of PTGs to PBTZs, and they often live in remote areas. And currently there are 75 PBTZs communities living in 18 state union territories, and Odisha has the highest number of PBTZs, which is the 15 in numbers, followed by Andhra Pradesh 12, Bihar and Jharkhand 9, Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh 7, and Tamil Nadu 6, and Kerala and Gujarat 5 each. So when it in prelims examination, there will be the question related to PBTZs. So Odisha has the highest number of the PBTZs, and these are the parameters which you have to remember, that on the basis of these parameters, the PBTZs are categorized. Coming to the next one. Next one is about World Malaria Report 2023. And World Malaria Report 2023 is released by World Health Organization, highlights the alarming situation of malaria in India and also in the world. And according to this particular report, there is a global increase with an estimate of 249 million cases in 2022, surpassing the pre-pandemic level. So what this report shows, that malaria is increasing day by day, and currently it has been estimated 249 million cases. And 95% of malaria cases globally occur in 29 countries, and 4 countries which have a highest number of malaria patients: Nigeria, Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, and Mozambique. So these all countries belongs to the Africa continent, and India accounts an astonishing 66% of malaria cases in Southeast region. So India's cases and India's situation is also alarming. And Plasmodium vivax, they are different protozoas which are responsible for the malaria. Among them, Plasmodium vivax parasite contributes to the about 46% of the cases in the region. So this is a dominant one. Then we come to the another one. Another one is about Africa is most impacted by malaria. We had already seen that the majority country belong to the Africa who are suffering from the malaria cases, with 94% of the global malaria cases and 95% of deaths in 2022. And WHO Southeast Asia region, including India, has managed to control the death by malaria, and they had reduced with a 77% decline in cases, which is very promisable data and a very affirmative data. And WHO aims to reduce malaria incidence and mortality by 75% by 2025 and 90% by 2030. So this line is very much important for your prelims examination. So here WHO reduce, what is the target of the WHO here? So it aims to reduce malaria incidence mortality. So here you have to also be careful, mortality cases 75% by 2025 and 90% by 2030. And global efforts are not sufficient towards the goal of reducing malaria. So there is a high time that we need to be focused, that global efforts are also required. And malaria is deadly mosquito-borne blood disease. So this is brief about malaria. Malaria is deadly mosquito-borne disease caused by Plasmodium parasites. So this fact is also very much important for your examination. It is caused by Plasmodium parasites. There are 5 Plasmodium parasite species that cause malaria in the human, and 2 of these species are P. falciparum and P. vivax pose the greatest threat. And malaria is spread by the bite of infected female Anopheles mosquitoes. So we already know this fact. And this is a very alarming situation in malaria, not just in India but throughout the world. Though India has positively grown in terms of the mortality, and mortality rate has been reduced by India by 77%. So this is the brief data. Coming to the next one. Next one is about Climate Change Performance Index 2024. And India has ranked 7th in the Climate Change Performance Index, which underscore the significant role and contribution to the ongoing efforts aimed at mitigating climate change. And this is a very great thing for a country that India has ranked 7th, and it published annually since 2005, and it is independent monitoring tool to track countries' climate protection performance. And it also increases the transparency in national and international climate policies. And it is published by German Watch, New Climate Institute, and Climate Action Network International. So it is published by German Watch, New Climate Institute, and Climate Action Network International. And what it points out, so it points out the climate mitigation efforts of 63 countries and European Union, which collectively accounts for more than 90% of the global greenhouse gases. So basically they are looking for the burden of greenhouse gases, and what it evaluates, so it evaluates the 4 key categories: greenhouse gas emissions, renewable energy, energy use, and climate policy. Basically they are focused towards the greenhouse gas, which is the 40%. And what are the other challenges we have? So no country performed well enough in all index that they should be ranked high, and because of that first 3 ranks are vacant, and Denmark has got the 4th place, followed by the Estonia and Philippines, and India moves to 7th position. Last year it was the 8th position. So interestingly, due to the absence of 3 positions, India has ranked the 7th. So what all it suggests, that we are very much vulnerable in terms of the climate change. We are very much vulnerable when it comes to the malaria cases, and we have also very negative cases when it comes to the diversity of the cows. But there are few areas where India is also performing well when it comes to the mortality rate, when it comes to the economic recovery. So these are the cases, and these are the report which shows the positive signs. Though there are various cases where India needs to improve, and reports are not showing very good condition in terms of the economy, in terms of the polity. So it's high time that India must take care of its challenges. And whenever in prelims examination, they will ask the question that who has published this report and who has taken over this report. You must take care that first you have to take care of 2-3 points, that who publishes this report, and if any organization associated with that report, you must know what are the findings of the world, who has stopped, and what is the current position of the India. And in mains examination, whenever if there will be the negative signs of the India, you have to write your answer on a positive note, that though India is not performed well and to this, but India has taken some affirmative actions and affirmative steps. The government is very much positive towards this direction, and these are the steps we have taken in order to improve our climate change, in order to improve the mortality rate of malaria, in order to improve the poverty condition, in order to improve the local government. So that's why with this understanding, your answer will become more beautiful, and your prelims understanding will also become much better. So I hope you like this session. If you have any queries related to this session, kindly ask in the comment section. Thank you.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.